So good, so good, so good.
Everything you want for summer is at Nordstrom Rack stores now and up to 60% off. Stock up and save on the brands you love like Vince, Sam Edelman, Frame, and Free People. Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
You know, one of the unfortunate sort of things that have happened along with the rise of AI, I think, is some of the kind of spectacular failures that we've seen, particularly in journalism. Organizations, you know, they have applied this new technology in ways that ended up kind of backfiring, and you know, it's unfortunate. It's really too bad because, you know, frankly, content generation is, in my view, probably the least interesting application of generative AI.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Gewertz. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Aaron Pillhofer. He is the Chief Product and Membership Officer of Chicago Public Media, one of the largest and most respected public media organizations in the country. And I believe you guys have WBEZ and the Chicago Sun-Times under your kind of umbrella portfolio. Yep. Is that right? Cool.
Yep, well, that's right.
Aaron, it's great to meet you, and thank you for taking the time out of your day. I appreciate you hopping on here with me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So I start the podcast the same every time. It's our first time meeting. I'd love it if you could set the stage and just tell me about your background, your kind of career in local media, and just tell us how you've gotten to where you're at today. I'd like to hear.
Yeah, let me tell you, it's a wild ride. I started in the news business in the 1990s, which for the audio audience, now you can have a mental image of an old balding guy with gray hair. And I spent most of my career actually in newsrooms. So I worked at smaller papers in New Jersey. I've done a stint in nonprofit journalism at at the Center for Public Integrity in Washington, D.C. I had a specialty in data reporting, though. So I've always been on sort of the nerd wing of journalism. And as such, I went to the New York Times as sort of the data person focused on money and politics. And I did that for a little while. How I got to where I am now really started there because I was super bored of money and politics. I had done it for like 10 years. And I started doing some work with the interactive team. And we built an interactive that analyzed NFL penalties. We went back and I parsed like all of this data, and we created this interactive, there's a piece of journalism that did this analysis of like which referees called the most pass interference calls and things like that. And I sort of thought, wow, this is way more fun than writing 1,200 word inverted pyramid style articles. And that kind of led me, I launched a very small product technology team inside the newsroom of the New York Times. And then sort of one thing led to another. I ended up at The Guardian in London for a couple of years. And I ran, in addition to running visual journalism, I also ended up running the product and engineering teams there. I took a short break in academia. I did some projects on the side, but then came back to the business about 3 years ago, actually. And I joined Chicago Public Media last summer. So I'm brand new there.
Very cool. Well, sometimes I like having people that are brand new in a role because, you know, you haven't been there 10 years and you're not jaded or whatever term you want to use. Could you talk a little bit about Chicago Public Media? I have a lot of folks on the show that are at small, hyper-local places people haven't heard of. Most people know, you know, Chicago Sun-Times, but could you talk a little bit about the organization, who you serve, the kind of, yeah, I'll let you take it from there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Minneapolis, as I mentioned to you before we started here, but I don't know Chicago that well. So this has been really fun for me, getting to know the organization, getting to know the city, joining an incredible organization with a long history. What attracted me to Chicago Public Media, in addition to the CEO, Melissa Bell, who is probably she is one of the most innovative, creative, forward-thinking executives in the business. She and Ezra Klein co-founded Vox.com. As you probably know, just very, very, very forward-thinking, unusually so for our business. That was a big attraction. But, the merger that happened in, I think it was 2023, between the Sun-Times and WBEZ, that is very, very, very unusual. There are not very many. In fact, there's only one other that I should put this in the past tense. There was one other that I knew of in central Pennsylvania. WITF merged with LNP, which is the local daily covering Lancaster County, and that failed spectacularly, unfortunately. It's worked a lot better for Chicago Public Media, but there's a lot of challenges. And so it was the challenge part of this that really attracted me. I can see these two organizations working incredibly well together. They, in many ways, complement one another, though there's been a lot of turbulence. I mean, obviously, anytime you take two organizations and merge them, there are challenges. And that's also part of the story. But that's what attracted me, is this incredible opportunity to work in an organization like this.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And that's why I love having people on the podcast is I could not have speculated on that before we kind of hopped on the call, but that with your background and like what you've done, and it seems like a really cool challenge. I had another question, but I might break it into a few parts. So your kind of role as chief product officer, I don't come from a journalism background, as listeners to the show know. I work with publishers. I talk to a lot of them on the podcast, but I've never been inside of a journalism organization, especially not one the size of Chicago Public Media. Could you talk a little bit about your day-to-day as chief product officer and what you're kind of thinking about, especially with this kind of strange merger that you were kind of referencing before?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much work to be done on the core of what Chicago Public Media is, which is WBEZ, Chicago Sun-Times, but also the future, where we're headed. So a lot of what I do is strategy. One of the first things that happened when I came on board, a deep and introspective period of strategic planning. So our strategic plan, we put a cap on that a couple of months ago. We've been rolling that out internally and to the board and to funders, just kind of presenting a vision for what Chicago Public Media can be and will evolve into. And I'm not, breaking any news here, but, our focus is inherently going to be on new product. We are going to be launching new product in Chicago. I can't talk about the details of it, unfortunately, but, this for me is, why I got into a role like this one, the opportunity to take an organization, institution like Chicago Public Media with all of its strengths and all of the things it does incredibly well, and find ways to extend that into new spaces, into new media, into new mediums, and find ways to expand our mission and help achieve the goals we're trying to achieve, which is help people in the city of Chicago navigate this crazy world that we're living in right now. So that's what's exciting for me.
Very cool, man. I was hoping you were gonna break the big, when you said kicking into the specifics. Could have been a download boost for me. No, I'm just kidding.
Can't do it. I like being employed.
That makes sense. I'm just joking around.
Yeah.
But so as chief product officer, the joke I keep saying on the show, and people are going to get tired of me of saying it, is it's 2026 and I'm legally obligated to ask you about AI because I'm on a podcast and it's 2026. As a chief product officer, things are changing so fast. How does that shape your thinking, and how are you looking at kind of the rise of AI when it comes to like your scope? Your position?
So, one of the unfortunate sort of things that have happened along with the rise of AI, I think, is some of the kind of spectacular failures that we've seen, particularly in journalism. Organizations like, I guess, Sports Illustrated, USA Today, some others, where, they have applied this new technology in ways that ended up kind of backfiring. And it's unfortunate. It's really too bad because, frankly, content generation is, in my view, probably the least interesting application of generative AI. And we are, we just finished putting together our AI policy, and content generation is one thing that is a line we will not cross. Humans are in the loop at every stage, at every step. And we're not interested in trying to find ways to auto-generate stories or auto-generate audio, things like that. So setting all of that aside for a moment, we are actively working in this space. We brought on we got a grant last year to bring on a fellow who's brilliant. Mark Chanovsky is his name. And he's been working on a bunch of different projects internally. Our focus is mainly on utilizing the tools to help reduce friction within existing workflows. So as an example, we produce every week, every month, we produce a number of stories in both English and then we translate them to Spanish. That used to be a process that would take days. So it ended up being, by the time the story was fully translated and published, it could be 2 or 3 days later. So it's like truly yesterday's news tomorrow, right? That's not how a news organization should work. One of the projects that Mark has been working on is utilizing AI as a first pass at translation, something that actually LLMs are really quite good at and getting better at all the time, taking a first pass so that the translator who's actually like reading it and approving it then just has to go back and make idiomatic changes and find those places where AI kind of didn't quite hit the mark. And that has reduced the amount of time it takes us to produce those stories by orders of magnitude. And now we truly can serve those audiences who are looking to us for this kind of content. We can serve them much better. That's just one example. We're doing work around archives, for example. We're finding other uses throughout the organization. I personally I think I've sort of gone. I've sort of made the full hype cycle journey. I've kind of come around again. Like I had that sort of moment of irrational exuberance when I first kind of got introduced to generative AI, and like most of us did, and then kind of went through that full hype cycle. And then now I'm sort of back in the sort of optimistic mode, but we are utilizing it in very specific ways, very specific domains, and in ways that allow us to do our jobs better and not trying to like replace people. That's not the goal.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Yeah, honestly, that's kind of what I find a lot on this show. And you probably saw me nodding vigorously when you said that, just using it to write content or create content is not what almost everybody on the show says that. I think it's the least exciting use of it also.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, just a little context on my business. It's funny you said you're not using it to generate audio. We do podcasts, and I have a hard time telling this when I have people come on, is we do AI narrated podcasts.
Right.
To shorten that, but not generated, because there's me or somebody that works for me checking everything that goes through, because it cannot be trusted. And you've seen some of those spectacular blow-ups.
Yeah.
The buzz late just this week that I've seen is from the AP. Has apparently gone buck wild with
Yep.
If that's to be believed, with AI and the generating stuff and everything.
Yeah, I think it's in response in part to sort of what Advance is doing. cleveland.com, and they're utilizing AI to, generate stories from reporter notes. And, their rationale is, well, then it frees reporters up to do, other types of journalism. I don't know that I buy that, but
Yeah.
that's the sort of current, that's the kerfuffle of the moment.
Yes. But and it's also, I've seen that use case of the translation come up before.
Right.
From what I understand, I'm not bilingual. We even talked about that, shockingly, about German before we started recording. But I'm not bilingual. But from what I understand, it gets you about 85-90% of the way there. But then obviously a native speaker or a fluent speaker needs to do a pass. But just that in between stuff, like the phrase I've used on here, and I heard it. I don't take credit for it. Is the AI sandwich, where the human is the bread, and then the AI is doing a lot of that work in the middle of the meat. But then there's still the kind of giving you superpowers.
No,
but,
that's absolutely right. Another use, another sort of product focused use case for us is utilizing AI along with sort of traditional machine learning techniques, entity extraction, so forth, to enhance our archive in a way that makes that content reusable and remixable in ways that, like, right now we just couldn't. Extracting information, locations, people, institutions. But what the AI piece of this, what an LLM can add to that is context, right? So traditional entity extraction, you can say, oh, here's an intersection. We know where that is. Here's a latitude. Here's a longitude. What an LLM can do is say, that is where the accident occurred, right? So it gives you this ability to do so much more with that content than you could possibly do through, human tagging or other techniques. And then you can remix that in ways that would just be impossible. You can almost personalize it down to the individual at that point.
Yeah, I just recorded an episode with a friend of mine and his business partner. They have a local publication and a kind of AI startup, and they're just thinking about this stuff a lot. And we kind of had a brainstorm call before the episode talking about, like, what does a small local newsroom look like in like 5 years? First of all, nobody knows. But he's like, what if it's just a black box with a search bar and you can build your own newsletter because it's what I'm into, or you can, if you're a business going in, you can extract this information you need of the permits you're going to need for a city and everything from the city and everything. So I don't think anybody knows. The kind of the joke we were saying on that call also was, we probably all these things we're envisioning right now in 5 or 10 years is going to look like a website from 1996. It's going to look super clunky and be like, oh, that's adorable. That's what they thought. But who knows? I don't know. It's just it's interesting, but exciting too. I've also gone full hype cycle and come back to being pretty optimistic about it myself.
Yeah.
For what it's worth. Cool. I kind of got through most of my prep, actually. I've been asking everybody this one. You've been in media at some big names, New York Times, Guardian, Chicago Public Media, for 30 odd years, whatever. I don't know the number. And you've seen a lot of change, and like we've been talking about, it's been changing really rapidly lately. If you were to flash forward 5 years, where would you see, first of all, Chicago Public Media, but also maybe just, this show's about local media, but local media and the media industry at large. Where do you see trends headed if you had to take a guess? It's kind of a hard question, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this will come back to haunt me, but as all predictions do. But I think the way things inevitably are heading is we as local news organizations simply have to change the way we relate to the people we serve. That's ultimately the only path forward for local news, in my mind. And what that means is we need to be hyper-focused on utility. We need to be useful for people. We need to be in the spaces that they are. We need to think about co-creating content with the people we serve rather than thinking of this as a unidirectional. Traditionally, that's how news worked, right? We speak, you listen. You are the consumer of news. And the kinds of technology advances that we've seen, AI being one of them, but only one of them, I think it points you in that direction. At least it's pointing us in that direction. That, as news evolves, as what our role here is, as it evolves, you can have conversations with people at enormous scale in ways that were just unthinkable 10 years ago, right? Or certainly pre-web. And weirdly, news organizations have been among the slowest to adopt those tools. Now, Chicago Public Media actually is, I would say, certainly one of the exceptions. Public media broadly and Chicago Public Media specifically are kind of the exception, are more of the exceptions. Chicago Public Media is the home of Curious City. Curious City is a co-reported project. People propose, they offer questions. There are things they're curious about. It's right there on the tin. They tell us what they're curious about and we report it out. And that is, sort of an act of in our case, that it's a radio show or, at the Star Tribune where I was before Chicago Public Media, it was a written reported story. But that is in my mind, sort of the future, right? It's finding ways to leverage these incredible tools we have now available to us to increase our relevance by engaging directly with people rather than guessing what they care about. We can actually know, and that changes really everything.
That's awesome. I think the narrative, you kind of touched on it there, where maybe the local news industry has been slow to adapt to changes and stuff.
Yeah.
There's that narrative out there. So, you started thinking that's, like I said, I've never been in one of these organizations. Do you think that's how people are thinking? It's really refreshing to see somebody in a position like you at a place like Chicago Public Media. Like, we have to use these tools we need to be connected, engaged. It's not a one-way stream of information, all hitting the nail on the head with all that stuff. So very, very cool to hear.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way because that's kind of the core of our strategic plan.
That's awesome. Well, I can't wait to see what all your kind of, I don't want to say top secret, but the announcements you have in the pipeline are. That'll be super exciting to see. Aaron, that's everything I had in prep. This is super cool. Where can people find you? If they want to find you online or anything else you want me to link to or anything like that?
Oh my God. I have I would say right now, I spend, to the extent that I am online anywhere, it's probably LinkedIn, weirdly, the most often, which is embarrassing to say. Yeah,
me too. That's where we met, actually. I know.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But I'm not even that active on LinkedIn. Honestly, my social media habit has completely vanished.
That's good. That's a good thing.
I don't spend that much time on it anymore. I haven't even, my personal website isn't even up any longer. So it's like, I'm an embarrassment of a digital person.
That's good. I
don't know how good it is.
That.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's that good, but you can find me at Chicago Public Media. That's where you can find me.
I'll link to your LinkedIn if people want to say hi.
That's probably the best.
And Chicago Public Media, all the links there.
Yeah.
I'll link to all that stuff. And when I go back through and edit this, if there's anything else we talked about that might be relevant, stories or anything like that, I'll put those out there too. Awesome, Aaron. Thank you so much. Great to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks for sharing all this stuff. And you have a great day.
All right, you too. Talk to you.
Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.